This video is about an experience that I had. I call it an experience because it stuck with me. It changed my way of seeing many things, and it became my belief system. It became my, I wouldn't say religion, because it's not really a religion, but it's my spiritual belief. And I would like to share it, and maybe it's important for someone else out there. So this is what happened. I call this an experience, although you could argue that it was a dream. I am a very vivid dreamer. I have the craziest of dreams, and sometimes they don't feel like dreams. They feel like something that happened, like an experience. And when you have a lot of dreams, very often, you kind of start separating them. Some are this fuzzy thing you barely remember, and it's just something you watch or you did, maybe related to the day-to-day. And some other times, no idea how, why, but this is one of those, and it has become my belief. So this is how it goes. To begin with, do you know how sometimes in a dream it starts? Like, this is the point where the dream starts and it progresses, and maybe there's a cut here and there and you have no idea how you got somewhere, or how some person appeared because the dream is confusing. Well, this one didn't really have a beginning, and I could argue that it didn't really have an end, because the whole experience that I'm about to describe happened in the same instant. So this is an experience that everything that I'm gonna say, it seems to have some sort of progressive, because that's how my brain made sense of it, how my understanding made sense of it. But I experienced it in a split of a, not even a split of a second, it was just an instant. It just happened all at the same time. So I become aware that I am. That's all I can say. I become aware that I am a being. I'm not saying that I'm a human, that I'm a person. I'm saying that I'm a being. Okay? And when I am aware, it doesn't really seem that there is anything around. But I am there. I am. And when I am, I try to acknowledge what is around me. And then this crazy vision happens. So imagine that you're looking, and yes, this is looking, but I'm gonna try to visually describe what I made sense of it. But the emotion of being there, it was strange, because there was not really space, or there was not really time. But for me to understand that there had to be some space, and I am organized it in a way, in a continuous way, that I made sense of it. So I perceive that beneath me there's this huge network of lines. So it's like white lines going in every direction, and some lines come from another one, and then split, and some go under and down, and they are like all over the place. And as far as you could perceive, this line extends in all directions. Okay, I cannot say there is up and down, but this seems to be under me. Okay, it seems to be like if I'm looking down, and there's these huge lines all over the place in all directions. And I'm like, I still not just perceiving, I'm not thinking about what that is, but I knew what it was. So then I keep looking around, and I see that these lines just appear and disappear. Some of them just change direction, and some of them just completely disappear or come back again, and they go longer and they go shorter. So this thing is moving. It's moving constantly. And then I see that in between the lines, there is some space between the lines and where I was situated, or the space that I was. And then I think like looking in the same level as I am. So let's imagine the lines are here, and let's imagine that I am here, okay? This is me, in this level. And I try to see what's around me. And then I notice that there are some, this is funny because people have spoken this to, I call it the Tentacles Experience. Because when I look around, there was tentacles. And by tentacles, I mean like small pieces of light. It looked like a light string coming down with a round bottom, if you want to say that. And there is also an infinite amount of these ones in all directions. And then I realized I am also one of those. My perception of, I wouldn't even say body, but individuality, it was that I was one of those tentacles. I am one of those tentacles. In my understanding, what I'm going to explain is my understanding of everything that I'm seeing after I have described the image. When these lines started and ended, you could see small pieces of tentacles going up and down. Like a little piece of the tentacle went down, and that started a line. And when the line ended, the little piece of the tentacle came back to its original source. So these things were like happening. It was like rain. It was crazy. And as they were happening all at the same time, there was some motion that existed and didn't exist at the same time. They were happening and not happening, or they happened and already didn't happen. I will come to it. There was also some orbs, okay, seemingly made of the same light that the tentacles were made of, but they were not attached. The tentacles all had like a source, and it was a cloud, and the tentacles came down from this cloud, okay? These sources, they were like flying around, moving around, getting in contact with the lights, getting in contact with the tentacles, but they were not really attached to the top. Then there was like electrical currents that tentacles will once in a while send to their lines. So if this line owned, say it that way, this tentacle owned this line, at some point they will do like electrical signals to these lines, and I will explain why in a moment. So this is part of my visuals. Then there is something else that I cannot say I could perceive in the same way, like put a visual on it, but I understood that I was there. Beneath this network of lines, it's called like a spider web, but it was much more complicated than a spider web. This network of lines, beneath them, it was pitch darkness, like black. I couldn't see anything. There was something there. I could perceive it, but I couldn't really understand what was there. And then also above this cloud, it was pure light. Pure light. And I understood what it was as well, or I knew what it was, but I could not understand it in my individuality. And this is the funny part. So if I draw the entire picture of how this looked like, from the top there is light, and on the bottom there is darkness. Then comes the network, then the clouds, here the tentacles, here are the interactions that are happening, and some space in between. And all of this was encapsulated, okay, into a, let's call it a sphere, because that's how I perceive it, like from the outside, if you want. Like, I could perceive it, I could really see it from the outside. It was a sphere, but it didn't have an end. Like, that was infinite, that just kept going. Like, if you see from the inside, as my tentacle, that thing just kept going. There was no end of it. Nevertheless, it was still encapsulated. Everything that was happening there was still a single thing. It's like a number 1 or 0, whatever. It's one number, but still have an infinite numbers inside it in mathematical expression. But yeah, it was infinite, but still was a one. It was a unity. Everything was part of the same thing. And here's my understanding of everything that happened and what I perceived there. So to begin with, the whole unity, that was, to my perception and to my belief, that was God. The whole, everything that was inside, everything that was created, everything that was physical, material, spiritual, knowledge, time, space, everything was inside, and everything was one, and it was God, okay? The top was the purest expression of light of God. The bottom, I was not really sure what it was. I think it was more a duality or a physical thing, but it was also God. The whole thing was God. And then what I was, the tentacles, was my true self. It was my expression of individuality. It was, I don't know, you can call it ego, maybe? It was me. It was my true self. It was my higher self. It was my higher self. Because all of their tentacles, they also have their own individuality. They also were absolutely and completely different being. Nevertheless, in this cloud where we were all connected, that was connected to the light, we had access to all of us. And I could access to it. I could connect to the cloud. And I was still myself. I could not intervene into what the other tentacles were doing on their own. They all had their own agenda. But we were one on the top. And here in the top, we decided as one. In the tentacle, we decided individually. But in the top, we were one, and we had access as a one to all that the others had. Maybe not will, not intention, but we had access to the information. And everything that's happening here, absolutely everything, it's about intention. So, what is my take on the whole expression? The little pieces of orbs that were coming up and down from the tentacles, those were pieces of the self being sent to the physical realm to start a life. And every line was a life. And it was curious because, as I explained at the beginning, the lives were not stable. They were constantly moving and constantly self-adjusting. And whatever one tentacle did could affect its own line, which will affect other lines. So the others will react to it and do something. Because the only purpose, and this is very meaningful for me, the only purpose that the tentacles had in these lines were to make them as long as possible. Experience as much as possible in every single life. It was not to make it a good one. It was not to make it a bad one. It was not to judge what happened there. It was just to make it as long as, capable of collecting experience as possible. And every experience was valuable. Having 2 days. Okay, I'm sorry, my phone decided that it was a good moment to install update, but I'm gonna take some coffee. So. I was saying something very meaningful, something very important. It's the purpose of each line. As I mentioned, the purpose of the lines, of the tentacles, was to make the lines as long as possible. There was no judgment, there was no goals, there was no agenda. You see, for the tentacles, having a life that is fulfilling, full of new experiences every day, that they don't look alike to the next one, was as meaningful as having a life where every day was the same. Okay? Because it didn't matter if two persons were doing exactly the same thing, because they were two different persons and they were not occupied in the same space, not occupied in the same time. It was already a new experience. Just the angle that their eyes are located from one to the other was already a new experience for her, for the purpose of experiencing. So it didn't really matter. It just had to be as long as possible. So, of course, your true self, your drive to do something different, to create something in the life will make it, let's say, richer or fulfilling for you as a living person, for you as a self that has decided to come and experience something new. It's not that you were completely, as a tentacle, it's not that I was completely detached to it. It's not like I didn't really matter, because these electrical signals that sometimes were sent to the tentacles was a way for the tentacles to aid, to correct, to say like, you better don't do that, and then you maybe didn't die that day. In my experience, I could see my life, all of it, at the same time. I could see from the moment I was born to the moment I finally die. I could see all of it at once. I could see myself in my bed having this experience. And it was interesting because that was not the only life I had. I could see my other lives. And I'll be back. Okay, there was another small interruption there. It's not a problem. So, where was I? I was talking about, the different lives that I had. So, my experience with my own lives was as follows. I could see this life. I could see myself having the experience. I could see the moment I was born and the moment I was gonna finally die, and all the other times that I died as well. I'm gonna come back to that. But I could not see only that life. I could see ones before and the ones after. You see, in this place, all time and space was happening at the same time. It's not that it already happened or that it's gonna happen. It's both. All my lives has already happened and they didn't happen yet. Why do I mean that they didn't happen yet? It's because as the tentacles connected with their lifetimes and they make changes, they moved. They may affect many lives, and then you say, but what happened? You know? Lives getting shorter and longer. Is this not static? And then my understanding was the following, and this is very curious because this is where my experiences start tampering with science. I would say, in this knowledge that I have of what was happening there, is that time and space was not fixed. It kept changing. Past, present, future, everything was changing. And what I was experiencing now, right now, as a human, is the best possible outcome that my higher self, or all of them, can come up with. But it's not fixed, it could change. I have acknowledged at that point in my life that I had died a couple of times. Not that I maybe died, it's that I have died. And my tentacles had, or the community of tentacles, because I can recall some moments in my life where I could have probably died, and just a random decision of myself or of someone else around me may have prevented that from happening. By one guy just dragging me closer to the walkway and not being hit by the mirror of a bus that passed just where my face was, getting distracted and not walking through, having a car running through very, very closely, or almost having a car accident by a fraction of a second, and a just very, very lucky or intervention of myself. It's just a decision that made a difference. But I can remember a few times in my life that I could have probably died. And then I knew that I actually died. That was one of the possibilities, and they did happen. But the whole expression of reality was changed by this system for me to keep going, to keep experiencing. And this is when it gets tricky. I understood that many possibilities of different lives happen and didn't happen at the same time, but only one is expressed. The same way, for instance, like you're writing a story. You say, I'm the character this, and you know what, I don't like it. So you delete it, and you write a new continuation of your story. It's not that you didn't write it before, you did. But you decided to delete it and continue the story in another way. That's a very similar way to say what happened. These things happened, but they were decided to put aside in a continuity, and they didn't exist anymore in the reality. But the matrix knew, the tentacles knew, the system, the unity knew that these things happened, and they were recorded as a possibility, and they were chosen not to be expressed in the reality. And this reminds me to some quantum physics, it's just a vast universe of possibilities. And unity, or God, is just deciding which one it wants. At that point I realized that I had an unmeasurable amount of knowledge, because I didn't just have the experience of all my lifetimes, I also have this experience of all other tentacles lifetimes. I could access to all of that. And this is the point when I realized I knew it all. All there was to know, all there was to experience, express, or that was ever imagined, or that was ever possible, I had access to that. And that was some really mind-blowing sensation, because I could connect to the whole life, all lives of people that in this life I knew, and it was a very strange perception, because when I connected to them, I lost part of my individuality, because now I was them also, but it was also me, so everybody at the same time. And then when I come back to my higher self, it was only me, still with the knowledge, still with the access. And that's why I could take, as my higher self, the best decisions. I was taking them for the sake of my lives, but I was not taking them alone, or not only with my knowledge. And this gave me a sensation that was visible only when I left the experience. And I will come to that. That's, let's say, by the end of this experience. So I think it's important to mention that these things are points that I knew, okay, that in the experience, everything happened at the same time. There was not a beginning, there was not an end. I'm explaining in a progressive way, so it's easy to understand the whole experience. But all of this happened like this. All the understanding came to me. All the visual came to me. All the system of how it was working came to me. So something that I have not touched is the little orbs that were flying around. These orbs had a job. They were like supervisors of the whole thing. They had their own wheel, like their own job. They had a purpose. They actually had a purpose. I don't know what was it. It was also part of a being. They were not connected to the network. And then in that moment, I understood that we would call maybe a god or an angel. And it was very curious for me, because I could relate how in humanity we have experienced these things, and the strange definitions that we have given, that it was easy to understand and how we came to that conclusion, but they didn't mean anything. Because what I understood in the experience is that, this is going to sound weird, nothing matters. See, there was no heaven, there was no hell, there was no punishment, there was no judgment, there was no good, and there was no bad. Even the things that we have perceived as bad, a war that caused mass destruction, had a purpose. A purpose in a way that it was one of the possibilities, could have been avoided, but it was one of the possibilities, and it was chosen to stay because it was, at the end, the best overall, for the sake of making the experience as long as possible. So it is very curious when that understanding came to me, because we live with these beliefs that what is good, what is bad, and those are not constructs that exist there. These are things that we created. And that made me calm. For many days after I came out of that experience, I felt an incredible peace and also a little bit of a numbness. It was this feeling of, well, you know, my life is already drawn from the beginning to the end. But at the same time, I still have to live it because it's not fixed. It can be changed. And that change depends on me. Not only me, my higher me. But my higher me, it's improve me because it's me. It was a little bit of calm numbness that followed me with this thinking about it every day, reasoning. Every time I tell the story, I reason more about it. Some people give me other intakes because they read a religious book and they say, oh, it looks like this or it looks like that. And yeah, I like to read about the religions, and I have come to realize that some things seem fairly similar. Also to quantum physics. For me, one of the most fascinating things is things that happen and didn't happen at the same time. They are registered as a possibility, but something, a common consciousness and another level of individual consciousness takes the decision of what comes to reality. That, it's cool. And it's hard to express in words. I hope that I'm coming easy to understand here, but it was a very interesting experience. Something that's very curious is that at that moment when I was connected with the cloud as a tentacle, having access to the experiences of everything that ever existed, understanding that there was not really a beginning, but there was not really an end either. It was more like a cycle, a recollection of just experiences creating and creating and creating again. That we were not the only things that we're experiencing, like humans. There was very strange living entities also experiencing in completely different ways, but also experiencing. And it's very likely that everybody has also, every higher being has also had those experiences, because it's just went to the infinite. They will focus on other experiences as well, and they were also part of yourself. My intake in all of this is that this is my belief. When the moment I wake up from this experience, I would call it experience and I would call it a dream as well, I am, even if it doesn't sound like, because of this video, very skeptic. So I will doubt absolutely everything that I hear or that happens to me, and if it doesn't make sense or it doesn't seem plausible or I cannot find an explanation on our belief system in myself, I will keep it in a loop and not accept it. This, it's in the middle way there, because yeah, it happened while I was sleeping. It was way too real for a dream, and it makes sense to me. It makes me believe it. And the moment I stand, because I was in the bed and I sit, and at first morning, oh, I'm like, whoa. And when I wake up, I felt I was still connected to the cloud. It's funny that I call it a cloud, but it looked like a cloud. And I still knew everything. There were no secrets for me. I knew it all. And when I had that excitement, like, I know it all, I could feel it like just escaping out of my reach. I was like, no, it's gone. So I conserve the memories of this experience. I conserve the feeling. Also the feeling of peace, a little bit of peace and numbness of, okay, I know what's gonna happen. I still know that I'm gonna live my fullest and best life, because that's what it's been decided. I don't know what it is, I still have to live it. I have flashes of my life and the lives that I see, I can still picture it. So I could say that I have more or less an idea how old I'm gonna be when I die. If I die, how well death was not the same. It didn't make sense. It was just like finishing an experiment, finishing a show, a game. It's just, you keep going. You didn't really die. But let's say this segment of this experience in this character or body can be finished. So I feel numb because it felt like, okay, I don't get a say in this. It's already decided, but I really knew that was not decided at the same time. It could still change what I saw, or many of the ones I saw, because I saw even possible deaths that I may have. That is not the best outcome, and the ones that I have already had. So that feeling was a little bit hard to deal with. But the other one, the peace, doesn't matter what, it's gonna be fine. That still follows me, and I use it as a reminder when things seems to be not going very well. I remember myself, well, it may be still the best outcome. Maybe I cannot see it right now, but better things are coming, or just what it has to be is coming. And maybe it's not the best for me right now in this life or in this expression, but it's the best overall. And that's very relieving. I think that helps. It helps me. It helps other people that I have shared this with, and it may help you. So this is my experience. I call it the Tentacles Experience. I believe that we are all connected, that we are all part of a higher consciousness that is all connected, that everybody or every consciousness is connected. I think we also have individuality, and I think that above that, in the higher expression of ourselves, we are God, one with God. Oh, once you're one with God, you're not self anymore, and you can be both at the same time. You cannot be God and self, or self and God. You're either self, you're part of the common consciousness, or you're God, and you're all at the same time. God doesn't have a personality. It doesn't. God doesn't have self, doesn't have being. God is everything and nothing at the same time. It cannot have a preference. It's not good, it's not bad. It's not, it's just is. It's just everything. I think that may be important to understand. We choose how we want to live, how we want to do things. No one's judging. No higher being is judging. It's ourselves judging. So, this is my belief system. This is what I feel to be true. This also explains so many things that are part of my reality, that are part of my day-to-day, that are part of my experience and many other experiences that I may have had. And I hope it gives you something, or at least entertaining. Bye.